I am thrilled to introduce Xio Axelrod as our keynote speaker for this Northern Hearts retreat. We originally invited Xio to come to Toronto for our conference, and she has been very gracious as we have pivoted and held her in like a no man's land of we don't know what's going on. And then we went virtual, and we are thrilled that she could join us today. Xio Axelrod is a USA Today bestselling author. She writes different flavors of contemporary romance and what she likes to call strange, twisted tales. Xio grew up in the recording industry and began performing at a very young age. As a result, her knowledge of popular music is nearly encyclopedic. Seriously, look her up on quiz night. She might even be up for some karaoke. A completely unapologetic, badge-wearing, fic-writing fangirl, Xio finds inspiration in everything around her, from her quirky neighbors to the lyrics of whatever song she currently has on repeat, to the latest clips from her favorite TV series, Scum. Xio weaves her passions into her books. When she isn't working on the next story, Xio can be found from behind a microphone in a studio, writing songs in her bedroom-turned-recording booth, or performing on international stages under a different, not-so-secret name. She lives in complete denial of those last 5 minutes of Buffy, with one very patient, full-time indoor husband and several part-time, supremely pampered outdoor cats. You can find her at Xio Axelrod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, Xio In on Tumblr if you're very, very brave. I love a good Tumblr. Or reach out to her via email, xio@xioaxelrod.com. Oh, and if you're curious about Scum, ask her about it. Just be prepared to settle in for the long haul. And we talked a little bit about that in the break, and maybe we can loop back to that at the end.
Sure.
But for now, I'm happy to turn the stage over to Xio for our keynote.
Thank you so much, Zoe. And thank you, Toronto Romance Writers, for inviting me to be with you today. Of course, I wish we were all meeting in person, but we're living in some rather challenging times. I was actually staying in upstate New York last week, about 1.5 miles from the Canadian border, and it was depressing to see all the blockades and road signs telling Mr. X and I that Canada was closed to us. I mean, literally, they had like bright orange signs saying, turn back here, like turn back now. No, really, turn back right now. And we were like, you know, we were on Lake Champlain. So the tip of the lake actually ends up in Quebec. And we were like, if we just swim for it, we can just get there. But anyway, I guess we're fortunate we can find a way to be together at all today. So yay for technology. I had an entirely different topic that I wanted to talk to you about today, but the world is literally on fire, especially down here south of the border. So forgive me, but I rewrote my speech last night for obvious reasons. I don't know about you, but I'm not okay, like not at all. And even the effort it takes to pretend I'm okay for friends and family at home, online, for colleagues and readers, it can be exhausting at times. And when my city, Philadelphia, went on lockdown in March, I had just returned from a reader event in North Carolina. It was the first of 6 events I had on my schedule for 2020, including this one. And I was really looking forward to visiting Toronto again, by the way. But I'll be honest, as much as I love meeting people and seeing friends and interacting with other authors and readers, I also kind of dread it sometimes. I suppose I fall into that extroverted, introverted bucket we've heard so much about lately. I had 2 events scheduled for March alone, one in Nashville and one in DC. And my first thought when everything shut down was, oh no, like this can't be happening. I bought all this cool swag and I'd stocked up on my paperbacks and I'd really been looking forward to those events, but also not. And of course, I didn't want to put myself or anyone else at risk, so I pulled out before both of them were officially canceled. But with all the event cancellations and postponements, I felt this weird mixture of fear, disappointment, and relief. And 6 months later, the disappointment is kind of lingering. I don't know when we'll be able to get together again the way we so often did. I don't know when the events I took for granted will be allowed to resume, and I hope it's soon, I really do, because I do miss it. But back to my original point about the world being on fire. We're living in unprecedented times. And people are looking around them for comfort and solace, for hope. And you know where many of them are finding it? in our books, in romance. Our books, our stories celebrate the very best of human nature, the very best of human resilience. And that's what we need right now more than ever. We need stories that show us who we can be, that give us happy endings, that provide light at the end of their dark tunnels. When the pandemic clobbered us all over the head, I think everyone came to realize just what was necessary for our survival, what was essential for us mentally and physically. We came to really appreciate the people who put their lives on the line for us on the front lines, from hospitals, emergency services, to supermarkets, neighborhood bodegas, to the pizza shop on the corner. All the little things we took for granted suddenly became necessary for our survival. I know I'll never forget the great toilet paper shortage of 2020. But it was actually heartwarming to see the support that poured out for our largely unsung heroes. I seriously teared up when those videos emerged from Italy of the opera singers serenading their neighbors every evening from their balconies, and from NYC of New Yorkers applauding their essential workers every night at 7 p.m. sharp. Of course, on the other end of that, especially on social media, there was a vocal minority that felt the need to point out just who wasn't essential. And at the top of their list, art and artists. This, while millions of people streamed and downloaded more books and films than most servers could even handle. This, while booksellers struggled to keep popular titles in stock. We were unessential. Inessential, unessential, words. But what broke my heart was seeing tweets and posts from authors echoing that idea that what they did, what they do, is inconsequential. I get it. In the wake of everything that is happening right now, writing kissing books may not seem important in the grand scheme of things, but I'm here to tell you it is. It's so important, particularly in times like these. You see, what we do, creating something from nothing, weaving happily ever afters out of thin air, seems so easy from the other side. Writing a story, a good story, seems like the kind of thing anyone could do. And maybe that's true. Let's say it is. Let's say everyone has one book in them. We'll even concede that it's possibly one good book. Why not? In music, we have the one-hit wonder. I know you're familiar with a few. Mambo number 5. I could walk 500 miles. I can't sing it because it's trademark, but you know. Who Let the Dogs Out, whatever. It's not that those artists never produced another song, in most cases anyway, or even another good song. It's just that for some reason, their other songs didn't resonate, didn't capture the attention and the imagination of the public. And then you have artists like U2, Beyonce, and Ed Sheeran, and Bruno Mars, among others, who write hit after hit after hit. And it's like magic. And yet, you rarely hear someone say, well, I could have written that song if I had some spare time. What authors do, particularly romance authors, is nothing short of magic. Because not only do you write stories about relationships, about second chances and true lasting love, you write what's possible when we're our best selves. You write what can happen when 2 or 3 or more people come together and find joy, the kind of joy that lasts and makes them better, stronger people for having found it, for having come together. You write aspirations, you write hope, and hope is what we need right now. While the world is a dumpster fire, and we all do our best to make it a better place with our donations, our volunteering, our advocacy, our protests, and our votes, romance authors go that one step further. Romance isn't afraid to get down and dirty. Okay, that can be taken a couple of ways, all of them good. What I mean, though, in this instance is that romance peels back the layers and shows us what makes us tick. Our connections, our ability to be selfless, our enormous capacity for love. There are wrongs, but they're inevitably put right by the end of the book or series. There are monsters, but they're always defeated. There's hurt, but there's also comfort. There's loss and pain and wounds, but there's also healing. Romance shows us that there can be devastating despair, but there's always, always hope. Last night, the United States lost one of its greatest champions, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was a pioneer, a revolutionary, freaking judicial rock star. When she started her legal career, wives needed their husbands with them in order to open a bank account or rent a car. They weren't allowed to represent people in court without male supervision. Ruth forever changed the world for American women and inspired women around the world to fight for their own equality. She gave us all hope time and time again, using her own life as an example, her own fight. She broke glass ceilings left and right, all while living in her own real-life romance novel. She was an extraordinary woman who did extraordinary things while supported by an extraordinary love, an extraordinary partnership. I mean, Ruth and Marty's relationship was the kind of perfect your editor would probably tell you was too much, like too good. So much so that Armie Hammer, who played her husband, Marty Ginsburg, in the film on the basis of sex, he mentioned in an interview how some studio execs felt the script needed more conflict between the couple for it to be believable. More conflict. Sound familiar? Marty and Ruth were portrayed as they lived, as equals in their relationship, which is difficult for some people to believe, I guess, too unrealistic for those studio execs. And romance as a genre is too often derided for giving people, particularly women, unrealistic expectations. But romance writers aren't afraid to demand more for our characters. We never let them settle. We never let them quit. We make sure they fight for what they deserve and reward them for the journeys they take. Our characters learn from their mistakes and grow from them, open up their hearts and share, overcoming incredible odds and obstacles to get that HEA. Why is that considered so far-fetched? And why wouldn't we need those HEAs in times like this? What you do isn't frivolous or irrelevant or unnecessary. Art is never unnecessary. You never know whose life you'll touch. Back in 2011, I was touring the pub circuit in the UK and Portugal. It was just me and my guitarist. By that time, I'd only released a couple of singles and an EP, which, if you don't know, is like 5 or 6 songs. So not a full album yet. And we played a lot of open mics and showcases, the kind of gigs that didn't pay, but also a few that did, most of which were what I call background gigs. That's when you're booked to play for the dinner crowd, and you're accompanied by the sounds of clinking glasses and clattering dishes and the steady murmur of conversation. In short, no one cares that you're there. My guitarist and I used to treat those restaurant gigs like paid rehearsals. No one was listening, so it didn't matter what we played. We would try out new material, new arrangements, and it was one way for us not to feel like piped in music. The pub gigs, though, they were kind of hit or miss. Some nights, some people were really into it and would listen intently to every song, whether they liked us or not. The English were particularly interesting audiences. I remember after one show in Bristol, this guy came up to me and said, "You were good." And I thanked him. And then after a beat, he said, "You were too good, too polished. I didn't really like that." And I wasn't quite sure how to take that. I mean, the goal is to make an impression on your audience, right? So hopefully a good one. But I had no idea how to respond to him being too good or too polished or whatever. Fortunately, or maybe unfortunately, since I'm still thinking about it 10 years later, he walked away before I could come up with something to say. Our last show on that same tour was at this place called the Vic in Swindon, about 80 miles west of London. And I actually talked a couple of friends into sitting in with us that night on bass and drums, so we had a full band. I think we had like a couple of hours of rehearsal the night before, but we managed to pull it off. My shtick, if you will, was to do the kind of covers that no one expected me to do. Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin. They really liked their 70s rock in Swindon. And I'd throw in some of my original songs, you know. It would go something like play a few covers, toss in an original, get them back with a couple of really good sing-along covers, sneak in another original. Some places wouldn't even book you unless you played covers, which is wild. Anyway, we had a pretty good crowd that night. We played the pub, the Vic, a few times before during their open mics and opening for local acts. So there were people in the crowd who had seen us before, and they were vocal, enthusiastic, and really supportive. It was a good end for the tour, especially after that other gig. A highlight we could go home feeling good about. After the show, we stuck around until closing. I never eat or drink before I sing, so I indulged. Hung out with friends and with some of the people who'd come to see us, let them buy us drinks and all. At one point, this guy, we'll call him Simon. Simon pulled me aside and said, "I just wanted to tell you that I fall asleep listening to your song every night." Okay, at first, I didn't know what to say to that. So I took like a step back from him And his eyes widened and he was like, oh no, I didn't mean it that way. Like, yeah, I go to sleep with you in my ear every night. That doesn't sound too great. But then he told me that he suffered from depression and that one of my songs, it's called Solace, had really resonated with him. He had absorbed the lyrics and used them to pull himself out of some dark times. I mean, wow. My song, my lyrics, a thing that I had played for indifferent diners at a restaurant a couple of nights before, had touched him, affected his life, and changed it a little. He had tears in his eyes when he told me this, and I got teary too. And we hugged, and he thanked me, and I thanked him, because up until that moment, I didn't think much of what I'd been doing. Playing shows for people who barely listened, for pub owners who barely paid, traveling on little sleep, subsisting on chips and scampi and midnight kebabs. Life on the road is fun, but also, not so fun. But in that instant, Simon had changed my perspective about what I was doing. It lit a fire under me. When I got home, I started writing more songs. My set list changed from mostly covers to mostly originals because I realized I had something to say that people wanted to hear, something that a few people might even need to hear, something that gave them hope. Romance is the vehicle we use to deliver hope. The whole boy meets girl, boy meets boy, girl meets girl, they meet them. That's the framework you use to open the window to possibility for thousands, millions of readers, to show them what could be despite of what is. And that's powerful. That is a freaking gift. And it's essential. So don't let anyone tell you that writing romance is frivolous or inconsequential. The day that happy endings become irrelevant, we're all doomed. And yeah, that can be taken a couple of ways too. It's all good. So I want to thank you for having me today. And I hope everyone stays safe and healthy. And Happy New Year to everyone celebrating this weekend. Here's to a better year ahead of us.